Hi, my name is Dave, and I'm assuming you clicked on this video because you want to watch the Marvel Cinematic Universe the right way. And when I say the right way, I mean Dave's way. Not only will this be the most comprehensive MCU timeline to watch, but it is specifically designed to give you, the viewer, the best cinematic experience. Let's be honest, we all live pretty busy lives, and it would be foolish of me to tie you down into a chair and force you to watch hundreds of hours of content. Not only would that be borderline kidnapping, but you most likely lose interest somewhere along the way. So instead, we are going to break down the Marvel Cinematic Universe into digestible narrative chunks. For example, we'll start off with the Infinity Saga, kicking off with Captain America the First Avenger and finishing with Avengers Endgame. TV shows like Agent Carter, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D, and Inhumans, alongside the Defenders Saga such as Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and The Punisher will not be included in this timeline, even though they run concurrently to the events of the Infinity Saga. If we were to include the series, it will add hundreds of hours to your viewing and break up the tone and narrative flow. So, we're going to push these series to the side and call them side quests. Once you've completed the Infinity Saga and you've fallen in love with the marvelous world of Marvel, you may choose to complete Side Quest A, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. saga. Furthermore, if you desire a dark and gritty and brutally violent side of the MCU, you may decide to complete Side Quest B, the Defenders Saga. Now, if you don't have the time nor the interest to complete these side quests, that's okay too, and you may skip ahead and watch part 1 of the Multiverse Saga, starting with Loki Season 1. But I will say this, it is highly encouraged for you to complete as many side quests as you can in order for you to understand the subtle references and connections made in these films and TV shows. Hopefully by now you'll begin to see that this timeline functions like a choose your own adventure, and depending on how much time and effort you want to give, it's entirely up to you. But before we begin, we need to establish some rules and disclaimers. 1. There will be spoilers. As I hold your hand and gently guide you along with the order on how to watch these films and TV shows, I will make connections from one property to the next. And 2, if it's referenced by Marvel Studios, then it is considered canon. And if another TV show or film references that reference, then that too is also considered canon. Let me explain, but before we begin, let me issue the first spoiler warning. In 3, 2, 1. Now, we know the character of Matt Murdock, whom you would have met in Side Quest B, the Defenders Saga, makes an appearance in Spider-Man No Way Home. Therefore, all the characters that are associated with Matt Murdock, such as Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist, are all considered to be a part of the same universe. Furthermore, the show Cloak and Dagger makes direct connections to Luke Cage and Misty Knight, and therefore, shows such as Cloak and Dagger and Runaways are also included on this timeline. I hope that this timeline will give you the best Marvel cinematic experience possible. So, strap in, grab some popcorn, and let's go on this marvelous ride in a universe that is guaranteed to blow your mind. Hi, and welcome to the Infinity Saga. Now, whether you are a long-time Marvel fan or experiencing the MCU for the very first time, I just want to say welcome. We are about to embark on a phenomenal journey of storytelling, and I'm super excited to take you on this journey with me. Now, may I remind you that this timeline will not include shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Daredevil, even though they run parallel to the events of the Infinity Saga. If you want to find out how these shows connect to the movies we are about to watch, then you may do so in the side quest videos. Furthermore, there will be spoilers as I will be making connections from one movie to the next. And as a heads up, this will take you approximately 51 hours and 4 minutes to complete the Infinity Saga. Now, let's strap in, get some popcorn, and let's get started. First, we're going to watch Eyes of Wakanda, a show that takes us through the history of Wakanda and the War Dogs.
Set between 1260 BC and 1896 AD, we followed the adventures of Noni, Memnon, Basha, and Jarani, also known as Iron Fist. The show influences and sets up the events seen later in the film Black Panther.
Next, we're going to watch Captain America: The First Avenger. And while the bookends of this film takes place in present day, the majority of the movie is set during World War II, from 1942 to 1945. We follow a scrawny Steve Rogers as he goes on a journey to become the iconic Captain America. And here we're introduced to an array of characters such as Bucky Barnes, Peggy Carter, Howard Stark, and Dum Dum Dugan. And joining this cast we have some notable villains such as Johann Schmidt, aka the Red Skull, and Arnim Zola. Now throughout the Infinity Saga, you will be presented with some pretty important artifacts, and in this instance we are introduced to an artifact known as the Tesseract. It is also worth mentioning that all of the Marvel movies will contain an end credit scene, so it's definitely worth hanging around till the very end. Next, we are going to watch the Agent Carter one-shot. This short film takes place 1 year after the events of Captain America: The First Avenger, as we find out what Peggy Carter is up to once the war has ended. Characters such as Howard Stark and Dum Dum Dugan return, and we hear for the very first time an organization known as S.H.I.E.L.D. Next, we're going to watch Captain Marvel. Set in 1995, we follow Carol Danvers as she unravels the truth behind her mysterious origin. And here we are introduced to two alien races, the first being the Kree, which include characters such as Ronan the Accuser, Korath the Pursuer, and Yon-Rogg, and the other alien race known as the Skrulls, which include Talos and his daughter Gaia. Now alongside these characters we have Maria Rambeau and her daughter Monica, and younger versions of Nick Fury and Agent Coulson. Oh, and remember the Tesseract, which we saw back in Captain America: The First Avenger, well that pops up again here. Now this movie has two end credit scenes. The first end credit scene takes place after the events of Avengers Infinity War, so it's best to watch that later. The second end credit scene takes place after the events of this film, so you can go ahead and watch that. Next on our timeline is Iron Man, and here we are introduced to a character by the name of Tony Stark, a billionaire genius who goes from weapons manufacturer to a superhero legend. And joining Tony Stark we have an ensemble of characters such as Colonel James Rhodes, Pepper Potts, Obadiah Stane, and Christine Everhart, a journalist from Vanity Fair. And returning from Captain Marvel, we have a slightly older Agent Coulson. Now if you look carefully, you may notice this logo scattered throughout the film, an organization known as the Ten Rings, which will be explored much later down the track. And if you hang around for the end credit scene, you are in for a very pleasant surprise. Taking place 6 months after the events of Iron Man 1, we see the return of Tony Stark, Pepper Potts, Agent Coulson, Nick Fury, and Colonel James Rhodes, now played by a different actor, Don Cheadle. And introduced for the very first time, we have Natasha Romanoff, also known as Black Widow. Now the events of Iron Man 2, The Incredible Hulk, and Thor all happen within the span of a week, and this is known as Fury's Big Week. If you look at the screens behind Tony Stark and Nick Fury, you notice footage from an incident at Culver University. This has been directly taken from the film The Incredible Hulk, and the end credits scene makes connections to the character Thor. Next on our watch is A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Thor's Hammer one-shot. This short film documents Agent Coulson's journey from when he left Tony Stark in Iron Man 2 to when we see him pop up again in the movie Thor. This short film shows us that Agent Coulson can indeed kick some butt and that he loves frosted donuts. Next on our timeline is The Incredible Hulk, and here we follow Bruce Banner as he tries to find a cure for his monstrous condition. Joining Bruce we have General Thaddeus Ross and his daughter Betty, Samuel Stearns, and Emil Blonsky, also known as The Abomination. Now there are several references to the original TV show The Incredible Hulk, starring Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, notably through the score and a cameo by the Incredible Hulk himself, Lou Ferrigno. Now you might be wondering whether you need to watch The Incredible Hulk show as part of your MCU watch, and my answer to that question would be a no. There is also no end credit scene for this film, although there is a before credit scene which sees the return of Tony Stark. Next, we are going to watch The Consultant One Shot, which sees the return of Agent Phil Coulson and introducing us to a new agent of S.H.I.E.L.D, Jasper Sitwell. This short film gives us a bit more context and resolution to the final scene we saw with Tony Stark at the end of The Incredible Hulk. Taking place in the realm of Asgard, we are introduced to a character by the name of Thor, and joining him we have a large ensemble cast such as Loki, Heimdall, the Warriors 3 and Lady Sif, as well as Jane Foster, Eric Selvig, Darcy Lewis and Clint Barton, the Avenger known as Hawkeye. Oh, and remember Agent Phil Coulson? Yes, he comes back here as well. Now the end credit scene sees the return of Nick Fury and the artifact known as the Tesseract. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for, The Avengers. This film unites Captain America, Iron Man, Black Widow, Hawkeye, Thor and the Incredible Hulk, now played by a different actor, Mark Ruffalo, as they come together to fight the villain Loki. And returning from previous franchises, we have Nick Fury, Agent Phil Coulson, Pepper Potts and Eric Selvig, and introduced for the first time, Maria Hill. Now remember the Tesseract that we've been seeing pop up from film to film? Well, that makes a comeback here. And on top of that, we are introduced to a new artifact in the form of Loki's scepter. Now, there are two end credit scenes for this film. The first gives us the introduction of our main antagonist for the entire Infinity Saga, and the second end credit scene sees our Avengers eating shawarma. Following the events of the Avengers, we're going to watch Item 47 One Shot. Here we see two criminals, Benny and Claire, rob several banks after discovering a Chitauri weapon left behind after the battle with the Avengers. Agent Sitwell returns to sort them out, and we're introduced to a new agent of S.H.I.E.L.D, Felix Blake, whom you will see again in Side Quest A, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D saga. Set in 2013, we're going to watch Thor: The Dark World, as we find out the consequences that Loki must face after Thor takes Loki and the Tesseract back to Asgard. Now there are strong arguments to put Iron Man 3 ahead of Thor: The Dark World, but for the sake of narrative flow, it is better to follow Loki through from the end of the Avengers over to Thor: The Dark World. Now most of the characters from the first Thor film returns here, as well as introducing us to several new ones, such as the Dark Elf Malekith and Algrim, also known as Curse. And while we keep some important artifacts in the back of our minds, such as the Tesseract and Loki's scepter, we are presented with a new one here in the form of the Aether. The end credit scene introduces us to the Collector, and we find out that both the Tesseract and the Aether both contain an Infinity Stone. Next on our timeline is Iron Man 3, as we watch Tony Stark navigate through his PTSD after the events of the Avengers. Returning, we have Pepper Potts and Colonel James Rhodes, and new characters such as Maya Hansen, Aldrich Killian, a little kid by the name of Harley. Don't forget about this kid because he will pop up again, and a version of the Mandarin played by a washed-up actor, Trevor Slattery. As we learn more about the history of Trevor Slattery, we're going to watch All Hail the King One Shot. Here, the organization known as the Ten Rings are not happy that Trevor have been impersonating the Mandarin, and therefore sends in a character by the name of Jackson Norris, also known in the comic books as Nighthawk, to break him out and make him answer for his crimes. Oh, and remember Justin Hammer, whom we met in Iron Man 2, he makes a cameo here as well. Next, we are going to watch Captain America: The Winter Soldier, as we see Steve Rogers navigate through life in this new modern world. Returning, we have Nick Fury, Maria Hill, Black Widow, Bucky Barnes, and Arnim Zola, whom we last saw back in Captain America: The First Avenger. And introduced for the very first time, Sharon Carter and Sam Wilson, also known as Falcon. Now, the events of this film significantly impacts the organization known as S.H.I.E.L.D, and you'll get to see this explored further in Side Quest A, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D saga. The end credit scene introduces us to Baron von Strucker and two new mysterious characters, Wanda and Pietro Maximoff. Set in 2014, we are going to watch Guardians of the Galaxy, a ragtag team which consists of Peter Quill, also known as Star-Lord, Gamora, Drax the Destroyer, Rocket, and Groot. Returning from Captain Marvel, we have Korath the Pursuer and Ronan the Accuser, and from the end credit scene of Thor the Dark World, we see the return of the Collector. Now in this film, we learn that there are 6 Infinity Stones, to which we've already been introduced to 2, in the form of the Tesseract and the Aether. In this film, we find out that there is a third one contained in an artifact known as the Orb. And who's after these 6 Infinity Stones? Well, it's a character that goes by the name of Thanos. Next, we're going to watch I Am Groot Seasons 1 and 2. Now these are short 5-minute episodes which explores the adventures of Baby Groot as he grows up in this vast universe. Following Baby Groot, we're going to watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which takes place several months after the first film. Of course, our original team returns alongside Yondu and Nebula, and joining the cast for the first time we have Mantis, Ego the Living Planet, and Ayesha. Now there are 5 post-credit scenes for this film, so just like Pokemon, make sure you catch them all. Jumping over to 2015, we're going to watch The Avengers Age of Ultron. Here, Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and the Incredible Hulk reunite to fight the sentient being known as Ultron. Returning from previous films, we have Nick Fury, Maria Hill, Sam Wilson, and Colonel James Rhodes' War Machine. We explore further the mysterious characters of Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, as well as being introduced to new characters such as Vision and Ulysses Klaue. Now remember Loki's scepter, which we last saw at the end credit scene of Captain America the Winter Soldier? Well, that contains our 4th Infinity Stone. Next, we are going to watch WHIH Newsfront episodes 1 to 4. Now this is a web series which you can find on YouTube, which sees the return of Christine Everhart, a character whom we were introduced to back in the first Iron Man film. WHIH is an in-universe news network which reports on the MCU's current affairs, and in this instance, we see Christine report on the relief efforts after the Avengers fought Ultron in Sokovia. Episode 4 sees Christine interview a prison inmate, Scott Lang, who will later be known as Ant-Man. As Scott Lang is being released from prison, we follow him on a journey as he becomes the superhero known as Ant-Man. Here, we are introduced to Hank Pym and his daughter Hope Van Dyne, Cassie Lang, and Darren Cross, also known as Yellow Jacket. As the new Avengers facility has been relocated to upstate New York, we do get a cameo from Falcon himself. And the end credit scene takes us right up to our next film, Captain America Civil War. Next, we are going to watch WHIH Newsfront episodes 5 to 9. Here we see the return of Christine Everhart as she and her co-host discuss on whether the Avengers need to be held accountable for the destruction left behind after the events of Captain America the Winter Soldier and the Avengers Age of Ultron. We hear that President Ellis, whom we last saw in Iron Man 3, and General Ross, whom we last saw in The Incredible Hulk, have met up to discuss future plans on how to monitor superheroes. And the final episode reports on the disaster in Lagos, Nigeria, which will be explored further in Captain America Civil War. Next, we are going to watch Captain America Civil War. As the Sokovia Accords have been introduced, we see a divide in the superhero community and a sever in the relationship between Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. We are introduced to characters such as Everett Ross and Helmut Zemo, and 2 iconic Marvel characters, Peter Parker's Spider-Man and T'Challa's Black Panther. Next, we are going to watch Black Widow. Now, the entirety of this film takes place within the last half of Captain America Civil War, from when Natasha leaves the Avengers compound to when Steve Rogers breaks out the Rogue Avengers from the prison known as the Raft. We are introduced to new characters such as Yelena Belova and Alexei, also known as Red Guardian. We are also introduced to a character by the name of Dreykov, whom we hear Loki mention to Natasha in the first Avengers film. Now, the end credits scene is a massive spoiler for Avengers Endgame, and I would suggest that you skip this one entirely and watch it after Avengers Endgame. Taking place 1 week after the events of Captain America Civil War, we're going to watch Black Panther as we explore the nation known as Wakanda. Joining Black Panther, we have an amazing cast of characters such as Shuri, Okoye, Nakia, M'Baku, and Eric Killmonger, and returning from Avengers Age of Ultron, Ulysses Claw, and from Captain America Civil War, Everett Ross. Taking place 2 months after the events of Captain America Civil War, we're going to watch Spider-Man Homecoming. Now there's a title card that says that this film takes place 8 years after the events of the first Avengers film. This is wrong. It should be 4 years instead. As we see the return of Peter Parker, Aunt May, as well as Tony Stark, we're introduced to Ned Leeds, Betty Brant, Michelle Jones, MJ, as well as Adrian Toomes, also known as Vulture. Scattered throughout the film, we have cameos from some of the most iconic Spider-Man villains, such as Mac Gargan, also known as Scorpion, 2 versions of the Shocker, and Aaron Davis, also known as the Prowler, the uncle to Miles Morales. Next, we're going to watch Doctor Strange as we follow a character by the name of Stephen Strange and his road to recovery after a horrible accident. We're introduced to new characters such as Wong, the Ancient One, Baron Mordo, and Christine Palmer, and villains Caecilius and Dormammu. Now this film presents us with another artifact, the Eye of Agamotto, which contains our 5th Infinity Stone. And the end credit scene sees the return of the Avenger, Thor. Next, we're going to watch Thor Ragnarok, which takes place 2 years after the events of the Avengers Age of Ultron. We see the return of Bruce Banner, Doctor Strange, Loki, Heimdall, and Odin, and introduce for the first time Hela, the Grandmaster, Valkyrie, Korg, and Surtur. Now the first post-credit scene occurs right before the 3rd Avengers film, The Avengers Infinity War. Taking place 2 years after Captain America Civil War, we're going to watch Ant-Man and the Wasp, as Scott Lang is towards the end of his 2-year house arrest. Returning, we have Hank Pym and Hope Van Dyne, and new characters are introduced, such as Bill Foster, Janet Van Dyne, and a character by the name of Ghost. Now there are 2 end credit scenes for this film, which takes place after the events of Avengers Infinity War, so it's best to watch that then. Now, we have reached the 2-part finale of the Infinity Saga with the Avengers Infinity War. As Thanos goes on his quest to collect all 6 Infinity Stones, we see many characters from the films previously watched come together as they fight for the Battle of Earth. The 6th Infinity Stone is introduced here, and the end credit scenes for Captain Marvel and Ant-Man and the Wasp is best watched after this film. Next, we're going to watch the finale of the Infinity Saga, Avengers Endgame. This film concludes many of the stories and character arcs that we saw all the way back from Captain America, the First Avenger. Many characters return from various franchises, such as Harley, the little kid we met back in Iron Man 3. Once you have finished watching this film, you may go ahead and watch the end credit scene from Black Widow, which introduces us to a crucial character, Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. Congratulations, you've just completed the Infinity Saga. Now, where to from here? Well, if you've fallen in love with the MCU and have the time to do a deep dive, I would highly suggest you complete the side quests. Side quest A is the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. saga, which includes 2 seasons of Agent Carter, 7 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and 1 season of Inhumans. These shows make direct connections to the films we have just watched, and we may find characters from this side quest pop up again in the future. Side quest B is the Defenders Saga. Now this is a more dark and extremely violent side of the MCU. However, I would highly suggest you complete this side quest, as many characters from this saga will pop up again in future films and TV shows. Then there is side quest C, to which I would like to call it the Teenage Angst Saga, which consists of 2 seasons of Cloak and Dagger and 3 seasons of Runaways. These shows make direct connections to side quest A and B, so I would highly encourage you watch this after the previous 2. Now, if you don't have the time to do this side quest, that's okay as well. and you may continue along with our main quest with the first part of the Multiverse Saga, starting with Loki Season 1. Whichever direction you choose to take in this vast multiverse, that is up to you. So, I'll see you all in the next video. So, you're gonna do some homework. I'm proud of you. Welcome to side quest A, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Saga. Now in this side quest, you'll be required to complete 2 seasons of Agent Carter, 7 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., including a mini-series called Slingshot, and 1 season of Inhumans. Now these shows run parallel and concurrently to the films you have watched from the Infinity Saga, so hopefully you have completed that quest. Now before we begin, may I remind you that this video will contain spoilers, and I will be making connections from these shows to the films from the Infinity Saga. And just as a heads up, it will take you approximately 120 hours and 42 minutes to complete this side quest. So strap in, grab some popcorn, and let's get started. First, we're going to watch Agent Carter Season 1. This takes place in 1946, 1 year after Captain America: The First Avenger. The opening montage includes footage from that film, as well as footage from the Agent Carter one-shot. We see the return of Peggy Carter, Howard Stark, Dum Dum Dugan, Anim Zola, and Edwin Jarvis, whom we met briefly in Avengers Endgame. Introduced for the first time, we have Dottie Underwood, Dr. Faustus, and Anton Vanko, the father to Ivan Vanko, also known as Whiplash, whom we last met in Iron Man 2. Next, we're going to watch Agent Carter Season 2. Taking place in 1947, we see Howard Stark make Hollywood films in Los Angeles. We're introduced to a new element known as Zero Matter, also known as the Dark Force, which will be explored further in the later seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. New characters such as Whitney Frost are introduced, and this season ends on a massive cliffhanger, which unfortunately we do not get to see what happens, as this show was not renewed for a Season 3. Taking place after the first Avengers film, we're going to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 1. Now if you remember, Agent Phil Coulson was killed by Loki in that first movie. However, in this show we find out that he has been resurrected, as he leads a team which consists of Melinda May, Grant Ward, Leo Fitz, Gemma Simmons, and Skye. Now many characters from the films make cameos here, such as Maria Hill, Nick Fury, Jasper Sitwell, Lady Sif, and from Item 47 one-shot, Felix Blake. Now this show makes connections to many of the films from the Infinity Saga, so let's get into that now. Episode 1, called The Pilot, references a dangerous serum called Extremis, which was first introduced back in Iron Man 3. Episode 8, called The Well, is a direct connection to Thor: The Dark World, as we see the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. clean up the mess made by Thor and Malekith. Episode 16, called The End of the Beginning, leads us into Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And from episode 17 to 22 deals with the aftermath, as we find out that Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. and that one of our agents is indeed a traitor. Next, we're going to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 2, as we see the team deal with the aftermath after Hydra's infiltration and the downfall of S.H.I.E.L.D. This season introduces us to Terrigen mists that, when exposed to certain humans, triggers Terrigenesis, transforming them into Inhumans. As we see the return of our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., we are introduced to many characters from the comic books, such as Glenn Talbot, Carl Crusher Creel, also known as the Absorbing Man, Cal Zabo, also known as Mr. Hyde, and Bobby Morse, also known as Mockingbird. Episode 19 sees a character by the name of Raina predict the events of Avengers: Age of Ultron, as she sees metal men cause mass destruction around the world. Episodes 20 to 22 deals with the aftermath of Avengers: Age of Ultron and the emergence of Inhumans. Next, we're going to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 3, as we continue to explore the emergence of Inhumans. Skye, now gone by the name of Daisy Johnson, also known as Quake, mentions that people are scared of Inhumans after the events of Avengers: Age of Ultron. In episode 1, Phil Coulson mentions to Fitz about the Pym Technologies disaster, making connections to the film Ant-Man. In episode 19, the Hive foreshadows the events of Captain America Civil War, saying that war is inevitable when we have billionaires creating iron suits and military men creating super soldiers. Episode 20 deals with the aftermath of Captain America Civil War, as Phil Coulson reads a newspaper article about Peggy Carter's death while watching the news about the public fallout between Tony Stark and Steve Rogers. By the end of the season, the Sokovia Accords are in full swing, and Glenn Talbot seeks to register all Inhumans, forcing Daisy Johnson, an Inhuman herself, to go on the run. Next, we're going to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4, Episodes 1 to 8. And here we're introduced to a character by the name of Robbie Reyes, also known as Ghost Rider. In Episode 5, we hear Senator Ellen Nadir mention the disturbances in Hong Kong, making reference to the final battle between Doctor Strange and Dormammu. We are also introduced to a mythical book known as the Darkhold, which will be later explored in the shows Runaways and WandaVision. And by this time of the season, the Inhumans Registration Act is in full swing. Next, we are going to watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Slingshot, a 6-part digital series based on the character of Yo-Yo Rodriguez. This show takes place after the Ghost Rider arc of Season 4. However, the majority of the series is a flashback, taking place several months ago when we see Yo-Yo sign the Sokovia Accords. Next, we're going to watch Inhumans, as we're introduced to the royal family of Atalan. This family consists of Black Bolt, Medusa, Gorgon, Karnak, Triton, Crystal, and the teleporting dog Lockjaw. As the royal family goes from the blue side of the moon to Hawaii, they find themselves in the middle of the Inhumans Registration Act, where in Episode 6, Crystal gets questioned on whether she should be on that register. Now take note, the actor who plays Black Bolt, Anson Mount, will reprise his role again as a variant version of Black Bolt in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. After Inhumans, we're going to watch the rest of Season 4 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. from Episodes 9 to 22. Here we continue to explore advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence and the virtual reality called the Framework. By the end of the season, we see the return of Ghost Rider as he travels through a portal similar to the Sorcerer's scene in Doctor Strange. Next, we're going to watch Season 5 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where we see our agents travel to the future to the year 2091. As they make their way back to present day, we discover a new element called Gravitonium, which has transformed Glenn Talbot to the villain known as Graviton. Towards the end of the season, we hear about Thanos' assault on Earth, making connections to Avengers Infinity War. Glenn Talbot, now drunk and disillusioned on power by the Gravitonium, decides to go help the Avengers fight Thanos, and it is at this point that this show no longer connects to the MCU films. It could be possible that this event created a branch timeline, as we never hear about Thanos' snap or the disappearance of half the universe in Season 6 and Season 7 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Next, we're going to watch Season 6 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where we are introduced to time-traveling aliens called the Chronocoms. This season explores parallel universes and time travel and continues to exist outside of the main MCU narrative. Now, to conclude this side quest, we're going to watch Season 7 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. The entirety of this season focuses on time travel as we see our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. navigate through the time stream. We see the return of Daniel Souza, who we were last introduced to in Agent Carter Season 1. As the team discovers that they are on an alternate timeline, they travel through the quantum realm back to the end of Season 6 where they defeat the Chronocoms. The finale takes place 1 year after Season 6 as we find out where each of our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. have ended up, making this a fitting conclusion to the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. saga. Congratulations, you've completed your first side quest. I hope you ate a lot of popcorn and enjoyed getting deeper into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now from here, I would highly suggest you complete side quest B, the Defenders Saga, as many characters from this side quest will pop up again in future films and TV shows. Of course, if you don't have the time, you may skip ahead and watch the first part of the Multiverse Saga. However, I would highly suggest that you don't skip your homework, so I'll see you in the next video. So, you want to do some more homework? I like it. Welcome to Side Quest B, the Defenders Saga. Now, just like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. saga, these shows run parallel to the events of the Infinity Saga. However, unlike Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., these shows do not make a lot of connections to the films themselves. In this side quest, you will be required to complete 3 seasons of Daredevil and Jessica Jones, 2 seasons of Luke Cage, Iron Fist and the Punisher, and 1 season of The Defenders. Now, these shows are extremely dark and extremely violent, so if you do not have the stomach to see a dude's head get smashed in by a car door, then maybe complete this side quest with one eye opened while holding your best friend's hand. I cannot stress enough how important these shows are, as many of the characters from these series will pop up again in future films and TV shows. Now, before we begin, may I remind you that this video will contain spoilers, and it will take approximately 140 hours and 47 minutes to complete this side quest. Now, strap in, get some popcorn, and let's get started. First, we're going to watch Daredevil Season 1, where we're introduced to a character by the name of Matt Murdock, a blind lawyer from Hell's Kitchen. Joining him we have Foggy Nelson, Karen Page, Claire Temple, and Wilson Fisk, also known as the Kingpin. Now, this show takes place several years after the first Avengers film, calling the Battle of New York The Incident. There is also a neat little Easter egg seen in Fogwell's gym, a poster of a fight between Jack Murdock and Kyle Crusher Quill, also known as the Absorbing Man, whom we met in Season 2 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Next, we're going to watch Jessica Jones Season 1, a private investigator with superhuman strength. Introduced for the first time, we have Luke Cage, Trish Walker, Jerry Hogarth, and Zebediah Kilgrave, also known in the comic books as the Purple Man. We also see the return of Claire Temple from the first season of Daredevil. Following Jessica Jones, we're going to watch Daredevil Season 2, where we see the emergence of an organization known as The Hand. Introduced for the first time is the Punisher and Elektra, and Jessica Jones gets name dropped in episode 5. We also see the return of Claire Temple as she mentions to Foggy about her interactions with Luke Cage, and also returning are the Dogs of Hell biker gang whom we last saw back in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Next, we're going to watch Luke Cage Season 1, and here we're introduced to new characters such as Misty Knight, Cottonmouth, and Diamondback. Claire Temple continues to make her presence known as she returns in episode 5, mentioning the events of the Hand in Hell's Kitchen. Episode 6, we hear Trish Talk, a radio show hosted by Jessica Jones' best friend, Trish Walker. Now, the MCU films play a big part in the storytelling of this season, as metal from the Chitauri attack has been made into weapons by Hammer Industries. Now, if you remember, Justin Hammer was introduced back in Iron Man 2 and later seen again in All Hail the King one-shot. By the end of this season, we see Claire Temple rip off a calling card for martial arts training by Colleen Wing, whom we will see next in Iron Fist Season 1. Next, we're going to watch Iron Fist Season 1, as we see Danny Rand return to New York after his supposed death 15 years earlier. Jerry Hogarth and Claire Temple return, and we're introduced to new characters such as Colleen Wing, Joy and Ward Meacham, and Bakudo. By the end of this season, we see Danny and Colleen travel to Kunlun, only to find the ancient city destroyed. After the events of Iron Fist Season 1, we are going to watch The Defenders. Now, this is like the Avengers of this side quest, as Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist team up to fight the ever-growing presence and threat of the Hand. Many supporting characters from the previous shows return, such as Jerry Hogarth, Elektra, Foggy Nelson, and of course, Claire Temple. By the end of this season, Matt Murdock is presumed dead, and Iron Fist is now tasked to defend the city in his absence. Next, we're going to watch The Punisher Season 1. This show takes place several months after the Defenders show, as we can see a newspaper article titled "Chaos Under the Streets" at the New York Bulletin. Karen Page makes her return, and we're introduced to new characters such as Micro and Billy Russo, also known as Jigsaw. Next, we're going to watch Jessica Jones Season 2 as we continue to delve deeper into Jessica's origin and traumatic past. We see the return of Jerry Hogarth, and Trish Walker has developed an obsession with gaining powers. Now in the comic books, Trish Walker becomes the hero known as Hellcat. Next, we're going to watch Luke Cage Season 2. Here we see the return of Misty Knight, now missing an arm after the events of the Defenders. We have cameos from Foggy Nelson, Danny Rand and Colleen Wing, and introduce for the first time Bushmaster and Nightshade. Following Luke Cage, we are going to watch Iron Fist Season 2. Returning, we have Colleen Wing, Misty Knight, Davos, Joy and Ward Meacham, and introduced for the first time Mary Walker, also known as Typhoid Mary. This season concludes Danny Rand's journey in the Defenders Saga, just as Season 2 did with Luke Cage. Next, we're going to watch Daredevil Season 3 as we go on a journey of seeing Matt Murdock recover after the events of the Defenders. Foggy Nelson and Karen Page reprise their respective roles from when we last saw Foggy in Season 2 of Luke Cage and Karen in Season 1 of The Punisher. We are also introduced to a new character, Benjamin Poindexter, also known as Bullseye. After Daredevil, we're going to watch The Punisher Season 2 as we see the return of Dinah Madani, Karen Page and Billy Russo. We are also introduced to a character by the name of John Pilgrim. Concluding the Defenders Saga, we are going to watch Jessica Jones Season 3. Here we see the fallout between Jessica Jones and her best friend Trish Walker. We're introduced to characters such as Fool Killer and Mindwave, and we can assume that this show ends right before Thanos snaps his fingers in Avengers Infinity War. Congratulations, you've just completed your second side quest, and I hope you're recovering well. From here, you may go on to side quest C, the Teenage Angst Saga, with 2 seasons of Cloak and Dagger and 3 seasons of Runaways. If you don't have the time for teenage drama, then you may go ahead to our main quest with part 1 of the Multiverse Saga. Whichever direction you choose, I'll see you in the next video. Okay, so we're going deep. Welcome to Side Quest C, the Teenage Angst Saga. Now if you're into the teenage young adult type of shows with a little bit of superhero flair, then this might be for you. In this side quest, you'll be required to complete 2 seasons of Cloak and Dagger and 3 seasons of Runaways. Now these shows make some connections to the MCU films as well as the side quests, which you should have done in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. saga and the Defenders Saga. Now before we begin, may I remind you that there will be spoilers, and it will take you approximately 42 hours and 10 minutes to complete this side quest. Now, strap in, grab some popcorn, and let's get started. First, we're going to watch Cloak and Dagger Season 1. Set in New Orleans, we're introduced to Tandy Bowen and Tyrone Johnson, a pair of teenagers who discover superhuman abilities. We are also introduced to Detective O'Reilly, who mentions her friendship to Misty Knight, who we last met in the Defenders Saga. Now if you watch Luke Cage Season 2, Episode 8, we hear Detective Nandi Tyler mention to Misty that O'Reilly had been transferred to New Orleans. Taking place 8 months after Season 1, we're going to watch Cloak and Dagger Season 2. Here both Tandy and Tyrone grow more confident in their abilities as they face a new threat, Andre Deshane, also known as Despair. In Episode 9, we see Tyrone read a newspaper article which was titled Luke Cage in Harlem Rumble by Karen Page. Next, we're going to watch Runaways Season 1, where we follow 6 teenagers as they discover that their parents are a part of a dangerous cult called the Pride. We're introduced to Alex Wilder, Nico Minoru, Carolina Dean, Chase Stein, Gertrude Yorks, Molly Hayes, and a genetically engineered dinosaur called Old Lace. As the teens dig deeper into their parents' shenanigans, they begin to discover their own unique abilities. Taking place 24 hours after Season 1, we're going to watch Runaways Season 2, as their parents go on a hunt for their children. In Episode 10, we see Nico tap into the Dark Dimension the same way Caecilius does in Doctor Strange. Next, we're going to watch Runaways Season 3, which takes place 36 hours after Nico battles her parents at the Pride's headquarters. We are introduced to a character by the name of Morgan Le Fay, where in episode 6 we find out that she's in possession of the Darkhold, which was introduced to us back in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. In episode 8 we see the return of Cloak and Dagger as they team up with the Runaways to rescue their friends who are trapped in the Dark Dimension. Now, it is important to mention that both of these shows were originally released on Hulu and Freeform. However, there was another Marvel show that flew under the radar called Helstrom. Now, the only connection to the MCU this show has was an Easter egg of the Roxxon Corporation seen at the end of episode 1. Now, Roxxon was mentioned in films such as Iron Man 3 and shows like Cloak and Dagger, and you can see Roxxon scattered throughout the MCU. The show focuses on Damon and Satana Helstrom, and you can categorize this show in the genre of horror. But because this show is so far removed from the main MCU, you may skip this one entirely. Now, if you've come this far and completed all 3 side quests, may I take this time to congratulate you and say, well done. I hope that you've enjoyed this era of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. From here, we will continue on with our main narrative timeline, starting with part 1 of the Multiverse Saga with Loki Season 1. Now, the Multiverse Saga is an even crazier ride, as we continue to journey with the characters that we know and love, as well as being introduced to a bunch of new ones. We will be jumping between timelines and universes as we explore Fox's X-Men universe and Sony's Spider-Man universe, and I can't stress enough how important these side quests will be. So, I hope you are ready, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi, welcome to part 1 of the Multiverse Saga. Now, if you've just come from the side quest videos or from the Infinity Saga video, I hope that you've enjoyed the journey so far. Now, the Multiverse Saga is a lot more complex and less straightforward, as you will be required to jump between universes and timelines. So what I've done is I've broken the Multiverse Saga down into digestible narrative chunks, and if you watch the videos in the following order, hopefully you'll be able to catch all the Easter eggs and references made between the films and TV shows. Let me break it down. We are going to start with this video, part 1 of the Multiverse Saga, starting with Loki Season 1 and finishing with Eternals. We're then going to change universes and complete Side Quest D, the Fox's X-Men Saga. Now, it's super important that you complete this side quest, as many characters from the X-Men universe will pop up again in future MCU films. We are then going to complete Side Quest E, the Marvel Legacy Saga, where we will watch films made outside of Marvel Studios such as Fantastic Four, Daredevil, Elektra, Blade and The Punisher. We are then going to complete Side Quest F, the Marvel Animated Series Saga. Now, if you want to catch all of the Easter eggs and musical cues seen in shows such as Ms. Marvel and films such as Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, then this side quest is recommended. We are then going to complete the Spider-Verse Saga, starting with Spider-Man Far From Home, as well as watching the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield films alongside Venom, Morbius and the Into the Spider-Verse franchise. We are then going to come back to our main MCU timeline with part 2 of the Multiverse Saga, starting with Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, this film will reference all of the side quests that came before it. For example, it will bring in a character from the X-Men universe while using a musical cue from the Marvel animated series. It will also bring in a variant of a character introduced from the Marvel Legacy Saga, as well as referencing the events from Spider-Man No Way Home. We are then going to conclude the Multiverse Saga with part 3, starting with Loki Season 2 and finishing with Avengers Secret War. So, I hope you guys are ready to go on this crazy journey with me. Before we begin, may I remind you that this video will contain spoilers, and it will take you approximately 24 hours and 48 minutes to complete part 1 of the Multiverse Saga. So, strap in, grab some popcorn, and let's get started. First, we are going to watch Loki Season 1, where we follow a branch timeline Loki, the one who stole the Tesseract back in Avengers Endgame. Now this show takes place outside of time, and we are introduced to characters such as Mobius, Sylvie, B-15, Renslayer, and He Who Remains. By the end of the season, the multiverse erupts into chaos, and we begin to explore stories outside of the main MCU, now referred to as the Sacred Timeline. Next, we are going to watch What If Season 1. After the events of Loki and the branching of the multiverse, we're going to explore alternate stories that we know from the Infinity Saga. For example, Episode 1 sees Peggy Carter receive the Super Soldier Serum instead of Steve Rogers, turning her into the hero Captain Carter. Now this season explores some fun ideas such as T'Challa becoming Star-Lord, Marvel Zombies, and seeing Ultron receive the Infinity Stones. We also see the return of the Watcher, whom we were last introduced to back in I Am Groot Season 2. Taking place several weeks after Avengers Endgame, we're going to watch WandaVision, where we see Wanda create her own reality. Returning, we have Vision, Darcy Lewis, Jimmy Woo, and a grown-up Monica Rambeau, who we saw as a child back in Captain Marvel. We're also introduced to new characters such as Agatha Harkness and Billy and Tommy Maximoff. Now we see the return of the book known as The Darkhold, which we saw back in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and The Runaways, although this version of The Darkhold is completely different. Moving over to 2024, we're going to watch Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as we learn that Sam Wilson has been working with the Air Force for 6 months after the events of Avengers Endgame. We see the return of Bucky Barnes, Sharon Carter, James Rhodes and Helmut Zemo, and new characters are introduced such as John Walker, Joaquin Torres and Carly Morgenthau. Now by the end of the season, we see Sam Wilson accept the mantle and responsibility of Captain America. Next, we're going to watch Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Here we explore in detail the organization known as the Ten Rings, which was introduced all the way back in the first Iron Man film. We also get to see what happens to Trevor Slattery, who was broken out of prison in the All Hail the King one-shot. Now this movie introduces us to an ensemble of brand new characters, such as Shang-Chi and his sister Xialing, Katie, Razor Fist, Death Dealer, and the real Mandarin, Wenwu. We get a great cameo fight between Wong and the Abomination, whom we last met in The Incredible Hulk, and the end credit scene sees the return of Bruce Banner and Captain Marvel. Next, we're going to watch Eternals. Now this might seem like an unusual placement, as Ajak in the film mentions to Icarus that Thanos' snap took place 5 years prior, which should place this film in the year 2023. However, it's a little unusual that there has been no acknowledgement of a celestial coming out of the ocean outside of an Easter egg seen in She-Hulk. Nevertheless, this film is quite standalone, as we are introduced to 10 godlike beings known as Eternals, and we explore the history of the Celestials and the universe. The end credit scene teases the origin of Dane Whitman's Black Knight, and we are introduced to Thanos' brother, Star Fox. Now, we are going to take a bit of a pause. Keep in mind, we are currently in the year 2024 in the Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline. From here, we're going to travel the multiverse and complete Side Quest D, the Fox's X-Men Saga, where we will be introduced to characters such as Wolverine, Deadpool, Professor X and Magneto. I can't stress enough how important this side quest is, so please do your homework and I'll see you in the next video. Hi, welcome to Side Quest D, the Fox's X-Men Saga. Now after the events of Loki Season 1 and the expansion of the multiverse, we can now explore stories and adventures outside of the sacred timeline. Now do note, we will not be watching these X-Men films in chronological order, as 20th Century Fox struggled with the idea of continuity. So to give you the best cinematic experience, we're going to get to know the original cast of X-Men first, before going back in time to watch X-Men First Class. Now the reason why we're doing this is to give cameos such as Wolverine, seen in X-Men First Class, more impact, and by the time you get to X-Men Days of Future Past, you will know all of the characters involved in that film. Now I can't stress enough how important this side quest is, as many characters from this side quest will pop up again in our main quest films. Now before we begin, may I remind you that this video will contain spoilers, and it will take you approximately 25 hours and 53 minutes to complete this side quest. So strap in, grab some popcorn, and let's get started. First, we're going to watch X-Men Origins Wolverine as we follow a young James Howlett as he manifests his mutant abilities. We also get to see how the metal known as adamantium gets bonded to his skeleton. This film introduces us to a large ensemble cast, such as his half-brother Victor Creed, also known as Sabretooth, William Stryker, Silver Fox, Remy LeBeau, also known as Gambit, the Blob, a young Scott Summers, and a very unusual version of Deadpool. Now this film does contain a couple of end credit scenes, so make sure you hang around till the very end. Taking place in the not too distant future, we're going to watch X-Men. Here, we continue to follow Wolverine as he encounters more mutants. We are introduced to characters such as Rogue, Jean Grey, Storm, Magneto, Toad, and Mystique, and returning from X-Men Origins Wolverine, Professor Charles Xavier, Scott Summers, also known as Cyclops, and Sabretooth. This film also gives us some great mutant cameos such as Jubilee, Kitty Pryde, Pyro, and Iceman. Next, we're going to watch X2 X-Men United, where we're introduced to characters such as Nightcrawler and Lady Deathstrike. We continue to explore the complex relationship between Wolverine and William Stryker, whom we met last in X-Men Origins Wolverine. We continue to get some awesome cameos such as Colossus and Siren, and we see Jean Grey tap into the Phoenix Force. Next, we're going to watch X-Men The Last Stand, the final part to this X-Men trilogy. We see Jean Grey turn into the Dark Phoenix, and we explore the Mutants Cure story arc. We're introduced to Beast, Angel, Multiple Man, Juggernaut, and Moira McTaggart, and make sure you hang around for the end credit scene for a very interesting reveal. Next, we're going to watch The Wolverine. Here, we journey with Logan as he deals with his grief after the events of X-Men The Last Stand. We see Wolverine travel to Japan, where we are introduced to characters such as Yukio, Mariko, Viper, and the Silver Samurai. Now the end credit scene leads us into X-Men Days of Future Past. From here, we're going to go back in time and watch X-Men First Class, where we are introduced to younger versions of Professor X, Moira McTaggart, Mystique, and Beast. We also get an extension of Magneto's origin, an almost scene-for-scene recreation of the origin that we saw from the first X-Men film. We are introduced to new characters such as Havoc, Banshee, Sebastian Shaw, and Azazel, and we get a cameo from the Wolverine. Next, we're going to watch X-Men Days of Future Past. Not only is this a sequel to X-Men First Class, but an extension of the end credit scene that we saw in The Wolverine. This film brings together the original X-Men cast from the X-Men trilogy, as well as the new cast that we've just met in X-Men First Class. This film deals with time travel, and we see how the events of this film impacts and shapes the future of the X-Men. We're introduced to new characters such as Bishop, Blink, Sunspot, and Quicksilver, as well as Bolivar Trask and his Sentinel program. Now there are two versions of this film, and I would recommend you watch the Rogue Cut version, as the character of Rogue was completely edited out in the theatrical release. From here, we will continue journeying with the younger cast of X-Men with X-Men Apocalypse. We are introduced to Ensabo Nur, an ancient mutant known as Apocalypse. We see younger versions of Scott Summers, Jean Grey, Storm, Nightcrawler, Angel, Jubilee, and Psylocke. We also get a brief cameo of Weapon X, also known as Wolverine, and it is hinted at that Quicksilver is the son of Magneto. Next, we're going to watch X-Men Dark Phoenix, a retelling of the Dark Phoenix saga that we saw back in X-Men The Last Stand. We are introduced to an alien race known as the Dabari, and we get a great cameo from the mutant known as Dazzler. Now this film marks the end of this particular X-Men series. Next, we're going to watch Deadpool, which introduces us to the proper version of Wade Wilson. Now, the character of Deadpool is known to break the fourth wall, as he references the two different actors that played Professor X from the films that we have just watched. We also get a more comic book accurate version of Colossus and new characters such as Vanessa, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, Ajax, and Blind Al. And if you look really carefully somewhere in the background, you might find a S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. Next, we're going to watch New Mutants. Now, this film is quite standalone and is set sometime in the distant future. We are introduced to Danielle Moonstar, Wolfsbane, Sam Guthrie, also known as Cannonball, Sunspot, and Ileana Rasputin, also known as Magic, the sister of Colossus. We also see the introduction of Demon Bear and a little dragon known as Lockheed. Next, we're going to watch Deadpool No Good Deed. Now, this short film was played right in front of the theatrical release of Logan and serves as a tease for Deadpool 2. Footage from this short was used in a tribute video for 20th Century Fox that we saw in the end credit scene of Deadpool and Wolverine. Set in the year 2029, we are going to watch Logan, as we follow an older Wolverine in a world where the majority of mutants are gone. We see the return of Professor X and Caliban, whom we were introduced to back in X-Men Apocalypse, and new characters such as X-23 and Donald Pierce. By the end of this film, we see the tragic death of Logan, and this concludes his arc in the Fox's X-Men saga. There is also a noir version of this film, should you choose to watch this in black and white. To conclude the Fox's X-Men saga, we are going to watch Deadpool 2. As Deadpool continues to break the fourth wall, we see him make a joke about Logan's death in the form of an action figure, and we see a cameo from the most recent team of the X-Men. We see the return of Vanessa, Blind Al, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, Colossus, and an accurately sized Juggernaut, but also being introduced to new characters such as Cable, Domino, and Shatterstar. By the end of this film, we see Deadpool travel back in time to kill off the dodgy version of Deadpool that we saw back in X-Men Origins Wolverine, bringing the Fox's X-Men saga full circle. There are also a couple of variations of this film, such as an extended cut called the Super Duper Cut and a PG version called Once Upon a Time, a Deadpool. Congratulations, you've just completed SideQuest D, the Fox's X-Men saga. From here, we will continue to explore the multiverse in SideQuest E, the Marvel Legacy Saga. Here, we will watch films such as Fantastic Four, Daredevil, Elektra, Blade, The Punisher, and Ghost Rider, and I can't stress enough how important these films will be moving forward. So, let's continue to do our homework, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi, welcome to SideQuest E, the Marvel Legacy Saga. Here, we will watch the rest of 20th Century Fox's Marvel films such as Daredevil, Elektra, and Fantastic Four, and other Marvel films made by other film studios such as Blade, The Punisher, and Ghost Rider. Now, before we begin, may I remind you that there will be spoilers, and it will take you approximately 32 hours and 36 minutes to complete this side quest. So, strap in, grab some popcorn, and let's get started. First, we're going to watch Daredevil. Released in 2003, we see Ben Affleck play our main character, Matt Murdock. We also see characters such as Elektra, Bullseye, Kingpin, and Foggy Nelson. Now, I would highly recommend you watch the director's cut version of this film, as it explores more of the lawyer side of Matt Murdock. Released in 2005, we see Jennifer Garner return as Elektra. We are introduced to characters such as Kirigi, Stick, and Typhoid Mary. Next, we're going to watch Fantastic Four, starring Ewan Griffith as Mr. Fantastic, Jessica Alba as the Invisible Woman, Chris Evans as the Human Torch, Michael Chiklis as the Thing, and Julian McMahon as the villain, Dr. Doom. Next, we're going to watch Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. We see the return of the original team, as well as new characters such as Norrin Radd, also known as the Silver Surfer, and a very disappointing cloud-like version of Galactus. Released in 2015, we see a reboot of Fantastic Four, starring Miles Teller as Mr. Fantastic, Kate Mara as the Invisible Woman, Jamie Bell as The Thing, and Michael B. Jordan as the Human Torch. Now, from here we are going to watch other Marvel films made by other film studios. These films are more dark and violent, just like the Defenders Saga that we watched back in SideQuest B. Released in 1998, we see Wesley Snipes play a character by the name of Blade, a half-human, half-vampire. We're introduced to characters such as Whistler and a comic book villain known as Deacon Frost. Next, we're going to watch Blade 2, as we see the return of Wesley Snipes as our main character. We're introduced to a brand new villain known as Jared Nomak. Next, we're going to watch Blade Trinity, the final part to this Blade trilogy. We're introduced to characters such as Hannibal King, played by Ryan Reynolds, Abigail Whistler, played by Jessica Biel, and Dracula, played by Dominic Purcell. In the extended, unrated cut of this film, we see an alternate ending where we see Hannibal King and Abigail Whistler chase down a werewolf. This could possibly be a character by the name of Jack Russell, Werewolf by Night. Following Blade Trinity, we're going to watch Blade the series. This show is a continuation of the Blade trilogy. However, Wesley Snipes does not return to play our main character. Instead, the role of Blade is taken up by actor and rapper Sticky Fingers. From here, we're going to watch a series of Punisher films, starting with 1989's The Punisher film starring Dolph Lundgren. This is your typical 1980s action film and does not include any characters from the comic books outside of the Punisher himself. Released in 2004, we're going to watch a more comic book accurate version of The Punisher starring Thomas Jane. We're introduced to characters such as Joan, Spacker Dave and Mr. Bumpo, and a character by the name of The Russian, whom you will see a version of in The Void, in Deadpool and Wolverine. Next, we're going to watch The Punisher Dirty Laundry. This is a short film that was screened at San Diego Comic-Con back in 2012, which sees the return of Thomas Jane as the Punisher. Next, we're going to watch Punisher Warzone, played by a different actor, the late Ray Stevenson. We're introduced to comic book characters such as Martin Soap, Jigsaw, and Microchip. Moving over to another character, Johnny Blaze, we're going to watch Ghost Rider, starring Nicolas Cage. Now, we did see a version of Johnny Blaze in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. saga, where we see Johnny Blaze's Ghost Rider pass on the spirit of vengeance over to Robbie Reyes. This film introduces us to Roxanne Simpson, the Caretaker, Blackheart, and Mephistopheles, also known as Mephisto in the comics. Next, we're going to watch Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. Now, this is kind of like a soft reboot, even though Nicolas Cage returns as Johnny Blaze. We see a different version of Mephisto, and we are introduced to characters such as Danny Ketch and the villain known as Blackout. Congratulations! You've just completed SideQuest E, the Marvel Legacy Saga. Now from here, you may move over to SideQuest F, the Marvel Animated Series Saga. Now this isn't completely necessary, so if you don't have the time to watch a whole bunch of cartoons, you may go ahead and start the Spider-Verse Saga, starting with Spider-Man Far From Home. Whichever path you decide to take, I'll see you in the next video. Hi, welcome to SideQuest F, the Marvel Animated Series Saga. Now this is a bonkers of a side quest, as you will be required to watch a lot of cartoons. But if you want to catch all of the Easter eggs and references made in future films and TV shows, then this side quest is recommended. So what's included in this video? First, you will be required to watch the 90s X-Men animated series. Now the theme song for this show will be heard again in films such as Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness and shows like Ms. Marvel and Season 3 of What If. Not only that, but Marvel Studios continued on with this show with X-Men 97. Now X-Men 97 is not included in this video, as that show is just too good to put in a side quest. So you will be watching that later in part 3 of the Multiverse Saga. Then, we're going to watch a collection of Spider-Man animated shows in preparation for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse references Spider-Man No Way Home, the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films, Venom, as well as all of the other versions of Spider-Man that you will see in this side quest. As you can see, all of these shows and movies are all connected. Now before we begin, may I remind you that there will be spoilers, and how long will this take? I have absolutely no idea. So strap in, grab some popcorn, and let's get started. First, we're going to watch 5 seasons of the X-Men animated series. Not only is the theme song iconic to 90s kids, but the show portrays the X-Men and X-Men related characters perfectly from the comic books. We explore stories such as the Phoenix and Dark Phoenix Saga, Days of Future Past, and the Legacy Virus arc. Next, we're going to watch 3 seasons of the 1960s Spider-Man animated series. Yes, the one with the famous Spider-Man theme song. Now the animation style is quite simple and basic, and we're introduced to villains such as Green Goblin, Dr. Octopus, and Mysterio. Next, we're going to watch 5 seasons of the 90s Spider-Man animated series. This show is set in the same universe as the X-Men animated series, so expect to see some of the X-Men appear in this show. This series includes some of the most iconic stories from the comic books, such as the Clone Saga and Secret Wars. Taking place on Counter-Earth, we're going to watch Spider-Man Unlimited. Here, Spider-Man goes on a mission to save John Jameson as he finds himself in an alternate world ruled by animal and human hybrids created by the High Evolutionary. Now the High Evolutionary will be a character explored further in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Next, we're going to watch 2 seasons of the Spectacular Spider-Man. We're introduced to some classic villains such as Lizard, Sandman, Vulture, and Electro.
Next, watch Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, where we do meet Spider-Man's amazing friends, Firestar and Iceman. We are also introduced to the villain known as Video Man, who we will meet again in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse.
Now, if you want, you may go ahead and watch some of the Marvel Lego animations that can be found on Disney Plus and Marvel HQ, as the Lego version of Spider-Man is seen in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. If you want to be thorough, you may watch other animated series which is set in the same universes as the 90s X-Men and Spider-Man series. These are Iron Man, Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, The Incredible Hulk, and Avengers United They Stand. It is important to note that the new Marvel animation intro contains images from these shows. However, these shows are not necessary for you to watch. Congratulations, you've just completed Side Quest F, the Marvel Animated Series Saga. Now if you actually completed this side quest, I want to give you a hug because that's commitment. I hope that you are not Spider-Man out, because from here we're going to go across to the Spider-Verse Saga. So let's continue to push through, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi, welcome to the Spider-Verse Saga. In this video, we are going to watch all of the Spider-Man and Spider-Man related films as one narrative structure. We are going to start with our main MCU sacred timeline, starting with Spider-Man Far From Home, and then jumping between multiverses to explore Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man universe, as well as the Tom Hardy's Venom universe. Now, films such as Madam Web and Kraven the Hunter are not included on this timeline, as there are no properties linked to the MCU that makes references to these films. Now, before we begin, may I remind you that there will be spoilers, and it will take you approximately 27 hours and 18 minutes to complete this side quest. So, strap in, grab some popcorn, and let's get started. Set in our main MCU timeline, we are going to watch Spider-Man Far From Home. This film takes place 8 months after the events of Avengers Endgame, placing this film in the year 2024. We're introduced to Quentin Beck, also known as Mysterio, and we see the return of Nick Fury and Maria Hill. It is revealed, however, that both Nick Fury and Maria Hill are the shape-shifting Skrulls Talos and his wife Soren, whom we met all the way back in Captain Marvel. By the end of this film, the identity of Spider-Man has been revealed to the public. Next, we're going to watch the first 5 episodes of The Daily Bugle, which you can find on YouTube. Now, these are short 30-second social media clips that connects to the events of Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, we're going to jump across the multiverse and watch Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. In this universe, we're introduced to Mary Jane Watson, Aunt May, Harry Osborn, J. Jonah Jameson played by the same actor we saw in Spider-Man Far From Home, and Norman Osborn, also known as the Green Goblin. Next, we're going to watch Spider-Man 2, where we are introduced to Dr. Otto Octavius, also known as Dr. Octopus, and other comic book characters such as John Jameson, also known as Man-Wolf, and Dr. Curt Connors, also known as the Lizard. We also hear a lady singing the theme song to the 1960s Spider-Man animated series. To conclude Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man trilogy, we are going to watch Spider-Man 3. Here, we are introduced to characters such as Sandman, Venom, and Gwen Stacy, and we see Harry Osborn's turn to the new Goblin. Jumping over to another universe, we are now going to explore Andrew Garfield's The Amazing Spider-Man. In this universe, we are introduced to Gwen and Captain George Stacy, Peter Parker's parents, Richard and Mary Parker, as well as Dr. Curt Connors, also known as the Lizard. Next, we're going to watch The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Here, we are introduced to Harry Osborn's Green Goblin, Electro, Felicia Hardy, also known in the comic books as Black Cat, and a very mechanical version of the Rhino. Moving over to another universe, we are now going to watch Tom Hardy's Venom. Here we are introduced to Eddie Brock as our main protagonist as he fights another alien symbiote known as Riot. Now there are two end credit scenes for this film. The first teases Cletus Cassidy, also known as Carnage, and the second post-credit scene teases the existence of another Spider-Man universe. Next, we're going to watch Venom: Let There Be Carnage. Here, we see Cletus Cassidy turn into the villain known as Carnage, and we are introduced to a new character known as Shriek. Now the end credit scene sees a mysterious spell take place, bringing Eddie Brock and Venom into our main Marvel sacred timeline, as Venom watches the Daily Bugle's report on the revealed identity of Spider-Man, which we saw all the way back in Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, we are going to come back to our main MCU timeline with Spider-Man No Way Home. This film picks up immediately after Spider-Man Far From Home, when Mysterio revealed the identity of Spider-Man. In his desperate attempt to reverse the damages done, Peter Parker seeks the assistance of Doctor Strange, wherein a fumbled spell brings over characters from other universes such as Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, Sandman, Electro, and the Lizard. And don't forget, the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man also make an appearance. We see the return of Matt Murdock, whom we met all the way back in Side Quest B, the Defenders Saga. Now, in order to stop other multiversal characters from entering our main timeline, Doctor Strange casts a spell that makes the world forget who Peter Parker really is. The end credit scene sees the return of Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock as he makes his way back to his own universe, leaving behind a small fragment of the alien symbiote. Next, we're going to watch the last 4 episodes of the Daily Bugle, where we see J. Jonah Jameson report on the events of Spider-Man No Way Home. Taking place immediately after the end credit scene from Spider-Man No Way Home, we follow Eddie Brock back to his own universe in Venom: The Last Dance. We're introduced to the god of symbiotes known as Null, and we get appearances from other symbiotic characters such as Lasher and Agony. While this concludes Tom Hardy's Venom trilogy, the door is left open for the possible return of Null in future Marvel properties. Next, we're going to watch Morbius as we follow Dr. Michael Morbius try to find a cure for his rare blood disorder. In the process of trying to cure his condition, he turns himself into a living vampire. Now the end credit scene sees how the events of Spider-Man No Way Home affects the wider multiverse, as the character of Vulture, whom we last saw in Spider-Man Homecoming, somehow makes his way over to this universe.
Next, we're going to watch Spider-Ham Caught in a Ham, a short film set before the events of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Here, we follow Peter Parker as he goes on a little adventure to defeat the villain known as Dr. Crawdaddy.
After the small teaser scene in the post-credits of the first Venom film, we are going to jump universes and watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Here we're introduced to Miles Morales, a new version of Spider-Man. He's joined by other multiversal characters such as Spider-Gwen, Peter B. Parker, Penny Parker, Spider-Man Noir and Spider-Ham. We also get appearances from some notable villains such as Green Goblin, Kingpin, Tombstone, Dr. Octopus and the Prowler. The end credit scene reveals the character of Miguel O'Hara, also known as Spider-Man 2099, as he travels to another universe, the 1960s Spider-Man animated series. Next, we're going to watch The Spider Within, a Spider-Verse story. This is a short film produced by Sony Pictures and the Kevin Love Fund to help raise awareness about mental health issues and to encourage teenagers to talk about their challenges. Here, we see Miles Morales try to balance the challenges of being a teenager as well as a superhero. Next, we're going to watch Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now this film makes many connections to the Spider-Man films and TV shows that we have previously watched. For example, Miguel O'Hara makes a reference to Spider-Man No Way Home, talking about Doctor Strange and the little nerd on Earth 1999-99. We get footage from the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films, as well as a cameo from Mrs. Chen from the Tom Hardy's Venom universe. We see an alternate version of Aaron Davis, whom we met back in Spider-Man Homecoming, only this time he's in his Prowler outfit. We get many different cameos from the Spider-Man animated series, such as the 1960s Spider-Man, the Spectacular Spider-Man, Spider-Man Unlimited, and Lego Spider-Man. We're introduced to new characters such as Spider-Woman, Spider-Punk, Spider-Man India, and Scarlet Spider, as well as a new villain known as the Spot. Congratulations, you have just completed the Spider-Verse saga. Now from here, we are going to go back to our main MCU timeline and complete part 2 of the Multiverse saga. I hope you are ready to continue on with this journey, so I'll see you in the next video. Hi, welcome to part 2 of the Multiverse saga. Now in this video we're going to come back to our main MCU sacred timeline as we continue to journey with characters that we know and love, such as Doctor Strange, Hawkeye, Nick Fury and Thor. Along the way we're going to meet some new characters such as Moon Knight, She-Hulk and Ms. Marvel. Now before we begin, may I remind you that there will be spoilers, and it will take you approximately 48 hours and 20 minutes to complete part 2 of the Multiverse saga. So, strap in, grab some popcorn, and let's get started. First, we're going to watch Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now this film takes place towards the later end of 2024 as Doctor Strange and Wong mentions the events of Spider-Man No Way Home to America Chavez. This film also serves as a continuation of WandaVision, as we see Scarlet Witch continue to search for her twin boys using the Darkhold. As Doctor Strange and America Chavez travel the multiverse to Earth 838, we discovered that our Earth has been designated as 616. We're introduced to a group known as the Illuminati, where if you've done all of your homework and watched all of the side quests, you will know each and every one of these characters. So let's get into them now. First, we're introduced to this universe's version of Captain Carter, whom we met in the first season of What If. We are then introduced to Black Bolt, where if you completed side quest A, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. saga, Black Bolt was introduced in the show Inhumans. We then get the reveal of Captain Marvel, where we see Maria Rambeau possess superhuman abilities instead of her best friend Carol Danvers. We are then presented with the smartest man alive, Dr. Reed Richards, also known as Mr. Fantastic. Now if you completed side quest E, the Marvel Legacy Saga, you would have already met 2 versions of Mr. Fantastic. And last but not least, we see Professor Charles Xavier, played by Patrick Stewart from the original X-Men trilogy. Now if you listen carefully, you'll notice the theme song to the 90s X-Men animated series play during his introduction. He's also wearing the same outfit as Professor X did in that same show. By the end of the movie we learn about the event known as Incursions, the colliding of 2 universes, and the end credits scene reveals the character known as Clea, the niece of Dormammu. Taking place during the holiday season of 2024, we're going to watch the series Hawkeye. as we see Clint Barton spend some time with his family after the events of Avengers Endgame. We're introduced to Kate Bishop and her dog Lucky, Maya Lopez also known as Echo, and Jack Duquesne also known as the Swordsman. We see the return of Yelena Belova, whom we last saw all the way back in the Black Widow film, as well as Wilson Fisk, also known as the Kingpin, from the Daredevil series. Next, we're going to watch Echo. This series takes place 5 months after the finale of Hawkeye, placing this show in the year 2025. We see the return of Wilson Fisk, and we get a great cameo from Daredevil. By the end of the season, we see Wilson Fisk take interest in running for mayor of New York. Next, we're going to watch Moon Knight, as we're introduced to a character by the name of Stephen Grant. Now this show is quite standalone, and the only connection to the wider MCU is an ad on a bus for the Global Repatriation Council seen from the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. This is the first time we're introduced to Egyptian gods such as Khonshu, Amit and Taweret, and the character of Layla becomes the comic book character known as the Scarlet Scarab. Following on from the theme of gods, we're going to be introduced to a few more in Thor, Love and Thunder. Here, we're introduced to Zeus, Hercules, Baal the god of dumplings, and the villain known as Gord the god butcher. This film takes place 8 years, 7 months and 6 days after Jane and Thor broke up, which we heard about back in Thor Ragnarok, which took place in 2017. We see the return of Jane Foster as the mighty Thor, King Valkyrie, Korg, Darcy Lewis and the Guardians of the Galaxy. Next, we're going to watch She-Hulk Attorney at Law, where we are introduced to Bruce Banner's cousin, Jennifer Walters. We see the return of Wong as he mentions the events of Spider-Man No Way Home, and we see leaked footage of his fight with the Abomination, which took place the year prior in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. Also returning, we have Bruce Banner and the Abomination, as well as Matt Murdock, also known as Daredevil. Now if you listen carefully, you will hear the theme song to his own show, which we saw in the Defenders Saga, play here as well. We're introduced to an array of new characters such as Titania, the Wrecking Crew, Mr. Immortal and Leapfrog. There is also the mention of a Lady Thor, which we saw in Thor Love and Thunder, and we are introduced to Hulk's son, Scar. Now like Deadpool, She-Hulk is a character known to break the fourth wall, and you'll see her do that here. And blink and you'll miss it, but we finally get an acknowledgement of a Celestial coming out of the ocean, which we saw back in Eternals. Now the next 3 properties, Ms. Marvel, Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, all share a common thread, which is Scott Lang becoming a celebrity. In Ms. Marvel, we are introduced to Kamala Khan, where she recounts the events of Avengers Endgame through her extensive research, listening to Scott Lang interviews. We're introduced to a new artifact in the form of a bangle, which grants Kamala Khan special abilities. We're presented with new characters such as Kamran and Red Dagger, and by the end of the season, it is revealed that Kamala is a mutant. Now if you listen carefully, you will notice the 90s X-Men animated series theme song play during this reveal. Now the end credit scene sees the return of Captain Marvel, which will be explored further in the film The Marvels. Taking place in 2025, we are going to watch Black Panther Wakanda Forever, which takes place 1 year after the death of King T'Challa. We see the return of Shuri, Okoye, Nakia and Everett Ross, and returning from Black Widow and the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Valentina Allegra de Fontaine. We're introduced to new characters such as Namor and Ironheart, and we get 2 neat Easter eggs seen on a news scroll on CNN, which talks about New Asgard signing treaties, which we saw in Thor Love and Thunder, and Scott Lang promoting his new book, Look Out for the Little Guy. Next, we're going to watch Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, as we see Scott Lang promoting his new book by reading it to a group of children. We see the return of Hank Pym, Hope and Janet Van Dyne, as well as Cassie Lang, who later becomes the hero known as Stature. We see a variant of He Who Remains from Loki Season 1 in the form of Kang the Conqueror. The end credit scene teases the events of Loki Season 2, and we get another variant of He Who Remains, Victor Timely. Taking place 30 years after Captain Marvel, we are going to watch Secret Invasion, as we see Nick Fury return from space after seeing him in the end credit scene of Spider-Man Far From Home. We see the return of Talos and his daughter Gaia, as well as Maria Hill and Rhodey. We're introduced to a new character known as Gravik, and this show reveals that several characters that we know from the MCU have been shape-shifting Skrulls. Following Nick Fury from Secret Invasion and from the end credit scene of Ms. Marvel, we're going to watch The Marvels. Here we see the return of Kamala Khan, Monica Rambeau, whom we last saw back in WandaVision, and Carol Danvers' Captain Marvel. We're introduced to a new villain known as Dar-Ben, and we see a comic book accurate version of the Supreme Intelligence. By the end of this film, Monica Rambeau finds herself in an alternate universe, where we are introduced to the X-Man known as Beast, played by the same actor Kelsey Grammer that we saw from the original X-Men trilogy. Next, we're going to watch Ironheart. After spending some time with the Wakandans in Black Panther Wakanda Forever, we see the return of Riri Williams with a new Ironheart suit. Throughout the show, we hear name drops of Kaecilius and Dormammu, and we are introduced to new characters such as Natalie, Ezekiel Stane, The Hood, and Mephisto. Next, we're going to watch Werewolf by Night, an hour-long special which focuses on the character of Jack Russell, also known as Werewolf by Night. We get the introduction of Elsa Bloodstone and Man-Thing, and while this special presentation was originally released in black and white, you may also watch this in colour. Taking place during the Christmas season of 2025, we're going to watch Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. We see the return of the Guardians of the Galaxy from when we last saw them in Thor Love and Thunder, and you'll notice that Groot has now grown a little bit bigger. Concluding the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, we're going to watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Set in 2026, we learn about the tragic origin of Rocket, and we are introduced to new characters such as the High Evolutionary and Adam Warlock. We see the return of Ayesha, and by the end of the film, we get a very different team of Guardians. Taking place 3 years after the events of WandaVision, we're going to watch Agatha All Along. As Agatha breaks free from Wanda's spell, we see her and her coven unlock the mysteries of the Witch's Road. We're introduced to Billy Kaplan, also known as Wiccan, as well as the entity known as Death. Congratulations, you've just completed part 2 of the Multiverse Saga. Now we are going to take a bit of a break because you've just watched a lot of content. But whenever you're ready, you may go ahead and start part 3 of the Multiverse Saga, starting with Loki Season 2. So, I'll see you all in the next video. Hi, and welcome to part 3 of the Multiverse Saga. Now in this video, we will start off with Loki Season 2 and finishing with Avengers Secret Wars as we come to the conclusion of the Multiverse Saga. Now before we begin, may I remind you that there will be spoilers. So, strap in, grab some popcorn, and let's get started. First, we're going to watch Loki Season 2. Now this show picks up immediately after Season 1, but because the show takes place outside of time, you can watch this a little bit later. Now this show expands upon the end credit scene that we saw in Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, and also references the defeat of Kang from that same film. We see the return of Mobius, Sylvie, B-15, Renslayer and Miss Minutes, and we're introduced to a new character called Ouroboros. By the end of this season, Loki becomes the god of stories as he holds the entire multiverse together in the form of the Yggdrasil tree. Next, we're going to watch What If Season 2 as we continue to explore stories from the multiverse. We're introduced to Kahori, a brand new character specifically created for this show. By the end of the season, the Watcher reveals to Captain Carter the multiversal tree, which we saw at the end of Loki Season 2. Next, we're going to watch X-Men 97. Now this is a continuation from the original 90s X-Men animated series, so you may consider this to be a Season 6. We see characters such as Forge use the mystic arts like we see in Doctor Strange, and we catch a glimpse of the Watcher. Now if you did a naughty and skipped the Marvel animated series side quest, then by watching this show will give you a better understanding of characters such as Gambit and Storm, who will pop up again very, very soon. Set in the year 2024 in the Fox's X-Men universe, we're going to watch Deadpool and Wolverine. This film takes place after Loki Season 2, as we hear the TVA no longer prunes branches of the timeline. Now if you've done your homework and completed SideQuest D and SideQuest E, then there should be no surprises here. We see the return of many legacy characters such as Elektra, Blade, X-23 and the Human Torch from the Fantastic Four films. We finally get to see Channing Tatum play the character Gambit, whom you should be familiar with after watching X-Men 97. We also get a comment about the many actors who've played the Punisher, where if you've done your homework you would know that there's been 4 actors who've played that character. Not only are we introduced to new characters such as Cassandra Nova, Lady Deadpool and Dogpool, but we see variants of characters from these legacy films, such as the Russian from the Thomas Jane Punisher film, Bullseye from Ben Affleck's Daredevil, as well as Sabretooth, Toad, Lady Deathstrike, Azazel and Juggernaut from the Fox's X-Men saga. Jumping over to another multiverse, we're going to watch Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, a reimagining of Peter Parker's Spider-Man story. We are reintroduced to Nico Minoru, whom you would have met in the Runaways show, and we catch a glimpse of the Watcher in the final episode. We're introduced to brand new characters such as Norman and Harry Osborn, as well as Amadeus Cho. Next, we're going to watch the 3rd and final season of What If, as we conclude the stories of Captain Carter and the Watcher. We're introduced to another original character called Birdie, as well as Storm, the Goddess of Thunder, voiced by the same actress Alison Seeley Smith, who voiced Storm in the X-Men animated series and X-Men 97. And if you listen carefully, you will hear the same X-Men theme song.
Next, we're going to watch Marvel Zombies. This show takes place 5 years after the zombie episode seen in Season 1 of What If. We are reintroduced to characters such as Kamala Khan, Riri Williams, Kate Bishop, Shang-Chi, Yelena Belova, Red Guardian and much more. And debuting for the very first time to the MCU, Blade.
Next, we're going to watch Season 1 of Daredevil Born Again. Now this show starts off in 2025 after Matt Murdock's appearance in She-Hulk Attorney at Law. It then jumps forward 1 year later to 2026 and then finally moves over to 2027 when Wilson Fisk becomes Mayor of New York on New Year's Eve. We see the return of Karen Page, Foggy Nelson, Vanessa Fisk, Benjamin Poindexter also known as Bullseye, Frank Castle's Punisher, and Jack Duquesne, whom we saw in the Hawkeye series. We are also introduced to a brand new villain known as Muse.
Next, watch Wonder Man. Here, we're introduced to Simon Williams and we see the return of Trevor Slattery and DODC's Agent Cleary. This show takes place 13 years after Iron Man 3, placing the majority of this season in the year 2026. Eventually, the show concludes in 2027 when we see the movie premiere of Wonder Man.
Next, we're going to watch Captain America Brave New World. Here we see the return of Sam Wilson as Captain America, Joaquin Torres as the new Falcon, and Samuel Stearns as the leader, whom we met all the way back in The Incredible Hulk. We finally get an acknowledgement of the Celestial coming out of the ocean, which we saw in the Eternals film. It is within this Celestial that we discover the new metal known as adamantium. We're introduced to the Red Hulk and from the Serpent Society, Sidewinder and Copperhead.
Set on Earth 828, we're going to watch Fantastic Four First Steps. Introducing us to Marvel's first family, we have Reed Richards' Mr. Fantastic, Sue Storm's Invisible Woman, Johnny Storm's The Human Torch, and Ben Grimm's The Thing. We are also introduced to Shala Bowles' Silver Surfer, Galactus, and Mole Man. The end credit scene takes place 4 years after the film's finale, introducing us to the villain known as Doctor Doom.
Following the events of Captain America Brave New World, we're going to watch Thunderbolts. This film sees the return of Yelena Belova, Bucky Barnes, John Walker, Red Guardian, Ghost and Taskmaster. Valentina Allegra de Fontaine mentions a president becoming a red monster, referring to President Ross's turn to the Red Hulk, and we are introduced to a new character known as Sentry. The end credit scene takes place 14 months after the events of this film, as the Thunderbolts, now known as the New Avengers, prepare for the arrival of the Fantastic Four. Now, at this time of recording, we are currently up to date with everything that Marvel Studios have released. As they continue to release new films and TV shows, I will update this timeline accordingly based on where everything should be watched. So please hit the like and subscribe button and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with this watch order. I'll see you soon.